Welcome to Pick Up and Deliver, the podcast where I pick up my audio recorder as I step off the train and deliver an episode to you while I walk home. I'm Brendan Riley. Well, good afternoon, listeners. It's a lovely day here in suburban Chicago, and I am walking home from the train. Well, it's been a little while since I talked about some new games, so I thought it's time for a shooting from the hip triple shot episode. If you're new to the podcast, Shooting from the Hip Triple Shot is a miniature review episode in which I talk about 3 games that I've played for the first time recently, or maybe first and second time, and I talk about what I thought of them and what you should think of them. Okay, maybe not that last one. Just to keep in mind, these are not in-depth reviews. There may be, I guarantee there are more insights to be had about the games once you've played them more times. I'm just on a first pass through the games, and that's what I'm doing. So to start off, we have a game that I mentioned a little bit in a previous episode, I think, but I'm excited to talk about it more fully now, and this is Lords of Xidit. Lords of Xidit is a 2014 game by Regis Bonacieux. It looks like Regis, but it's a French name, so probably Regis Bonacieux, and published by Libelud Publishers. It's in the same world as the game Seasons, so the art style is the same, and if you know that game Seasons, they're narratively connected, I guess, but it doesn't really matter. There's a massive bit of thematic flavor on the first page of the rulebook, which tells you, in the deep dark past, human beings managed to fight off the evil monsters that were rampaging over the land, and everything was made safe, but then somehow those monsters woke up again, and trouble is a-brewin'. In the game, you play, traveling heroes who are raising armies and defeating monsters. I think there's something interesting to be said about the politics of this game, which I will return to in another episode, but the gameplay is really interesting. So there are 2 elements in this game that are neat: the scoring and the programming. So it's a programming game. On each round, there's like 15 rounds or something. Each round, you're going to set 6 moves on your dial. There are 3 possible roads that you can move on: the gray roads, the blue roads, and the pink roads. So you could pick one of the roads, or you could pick the action indicator. And when you do an action, your figure is going to do whatever action is available at the location you're at. And then the last thing you could do is wait, which is literally just do nothing for that sequence. And since you're all moving around the board at the same time, a big part of the game is trying to plan the sequence out so that you and your opponents move at the same time, and you are able to get into the place where you want to go in the sequence you want to go. So what are you doing on the board? There are cities where you can recruit people, and there are cities where you can fight monsters. And over the course of the game, the places where people can be recruited move, and the places where you can fight monsters move. And so you're sort of working to combat these things, and you fight the monsters just by spending people you've recruited for your military. So you literally go a place, recruit some people, and then you go fight a monster and you spend those people. The tricky part is each monster has its own recipe, and so you have to try to recruit the person who fits what you're looking for. And the tricky part of that is that if someone else gets the city before you do, maybe they're going to take the one that you wanted, and it'll screw up your whole plan. You're also only allowed to recruit from each city once per round, and so you can't just sit on a location and recruit all the people out of it. The programming part's really clever and makes for amusing, if frustrating, experiences in which you think you've got it all planned out, and then you end up with nothing to do because your opponent went in and snagged the last person from that city, and now it's an empty city, and you show up and try to do something. Or even worse, you go to fight a monster and there's no monster there anymore. Or you go to recruit a person and there's a monster there instead. Or, as happened to me 3 times, you go to fight a monster and realize you weren't quite paying attention right, and you don't have the warrior that you needed to defeat that monster. And then you've wasted 2 turns. You wasted a turn moving there, and you wasted a turn trying to fight the monster when you couldn't. So the programming element is really neat, makes for very interesting gameplay. And then on top of that, the scoring element in this game is particularly clever, and I've been fascinated with it. I've told people about it a bunch of times. I may even have already said something about it on the podcast. I can't remember. But the way the programming works, or the way the scoring works, there are 3 kinds of rewards you can get from defeating a monster. You can get money, you can get fame, and you can get sorcery towers. When you defeat a monster, you pick 2 of those 3 rewards to take. You can take money, in which case you just get money and it goes behind your shield. The way fame works, each city is at a juncture of roads, and in the areas between roads, so sort of like if there's a square made by roads, the area that's created in that square is one region, and you gain sort of fame influence in that region by putting your fame tokens there. So you gain fame points from killing a monster, and you pick which of the regions adjacent to where you fought the monster you're going to put your influence. And then finally you get the wizard towers. The way those work, you have these little segmented tower pieces, and you can have up to 4 of them in a single wizard tower. And each city is allowed to have 1 wizard tower. So as the warrior, whatever you are, if no one else has built a tower there yet, you can start a tower by putting 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending how many you get from defeating the monster. If sometime in the game you're able to go fight another monster in that city, you can add more wizard towers to it. Or there are a couple other ways you could add just 1 or 2 wizard towers randomly. You only get to do that if you started the wizard tower there. If someone else starts a wizard tower in that city, you can't take that reward. So you've got 3 different ways you're scoring. You're scoring money, you're scoring fame, and you're scoring wizard towers. Well, at the end of the game, there are 3 ranks. And at the beginning of the game, you're going to randomize these tokens and put them out, and you're going to put, say, money in 1, fame in 1, wizard and tower in or money in 1, fame in 2, wizard tower in 3. Or maybe another arrangement, you mix them around. At the end of the game, first thing you do is everybody counts up their money, if money's the first one. The player who has the least amount of money is out of the game. Or in a 5-player game, the 2 players with the least amount of money are out of the game. Then you add up fame. The player who's still in the game, who has the least amount of fame, is out of the game. And the fame is sort of an area control thing. You get fame points for having the most fame in a region. So you add up the fame points. Whoever has the least fame points of the players who are still in the game, they're out. Then finally, as you come to the 3rd round, you only have 2 players left. In a 5-player game, you've eliminated 2 people, then 1 person. In a 4-player game, you eliminate 1, then 1. In a 3-player game, I'm not really sure how it works. There are special rules for the 3-player game. But then you go to the final thing, which in the example here I'm giving you is wizard towers. Who have the most wizard towers wins the game. So there's this delicious question you have to ask yourself every time you take a monster, which is, how many points do I have? Where do I think I need to shore up my points? Because I can't be last in either of those first 2 categories. I need to be first in the last one. It's fascinating, really interesting game. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm looking forward to playing it again. That's Lords of Xidit. For those of you keeping track or who've been listening a long time, you know that's been on my to-play list a number of times. Of course, it wasn't on there this month, but it's finally off my shelf of opportunity, so huzzah! All right, next up we have Nightmare Horror Adventures. Welcome to Crafton Mansion. This was published in 2021. It's a collaborative design from Team Identity, published by Identity Games. Presumably they're the group Team Identity. I imagine it's somewhat like the Prospero Hall publisher group. Anyhow, Nightmare Adventures Welcome to Crafton Mansion is a mystery game in which you're trying to solve a big mystery, kind of like an escape room type thing, but it's incredibly atmospheric. The game has a number of elements, including the components that come in the box, including some blindfolds. I'm not going to tell you what those are about, and an app that has lots of good voice acting in it, in order to create this sort of creepy storyline that you're going to execute. Each player gets a character card. Read on the back, it tells you a little bit about what you're supposed to be like, and there's a little bit of acting as you're playing. When you're reading your dialogue, which the game gives you dialogue cards to read, you're supposed to read them sort of following your character's cues. And then as a group, you're going to explore the mansion, finding different clues and such. And when time runs out, then you have to solve the mystery. This game was really fun. If you like the escape room type games, that's not what this is. There's not a whole lot of puzzles per se. It's much more of a mystery, deductive adventure kind of. Something more like it's probably closer to a Sherlock Holmes or a Hunt a Killer type, those box sets where you get a bunch of stuff and you get a bunch of clues and you're supposed to try to solve the mystery. Of course, this one has the added tension of having a timer and an app and a story that's driven by those things, by the timer and the app. The story is well written. The characters are goofy and a little bit melodramatic, but that's okay. For a thing like this, goofy and melodramatic is exactly the tone I would want to hit. It's definitely not replayable. So if you're somebody who doesn't like the one-play games, this is not up your alley. This is very much a one-play game. However, it is in my preferred mode, a one-play game that doesn't require you to destroy anything. So you could absolutely resell it or give it to a friend and they could play with their group. But it is entirely unreplayable by the group that played it. It's a one-time play for sure. The story and the reveals in the story are so intricate that it absolutely would not work to play it again. The one downside I would say is there was one rule about how you move and resolve things that I found burdensome. And the rule is written pretty clearly, so I'm pretty sure we were playing it right. I just found it a very obnoxious rule. And that is that you have this building you're moving through, and it says you can move back to any room you've been to before, but you have very limited number of actions that you can do. And even though it says you can move back to any room you've been to before, it says you use a movement to do that. So if there's 5 rooms and there's a door that we never went through in room 3, but we've gone on to room 5, we can go back to room 3 to open that door. But before we open the door, we have to use one of our precious moves to go back to room 3 and then open the door. The frustrating thing about that is the game definitely does not encourage or reward you for trying to do everything in a room all at once before you move on to the next room. There are some things you literally can't do until you've done other things. So between those two things, I found it very frustrating that we had to waste moves on essentially moving to an empty room. But that's the way the game worked. Overall, really fun. I think definitely something you should play in a home with people you know and trust. There's nothing bad in it per se, but like I said, there are blindfolds as part of the game. And it is meant to be a moody horror game, so you don't want to play it I wouldn't want to play it at my game club that meets in a bar, for example. That's Welcome to Crafton Mansion, part of what appears to be a series called Nightmare Horror Adventures, published in 2021. Definitely worth playing, and I'm looking forward to playing more of those if I get the opportunity. And finally, the last game I want to talk about today is the game that I really wanted from Gen Con, and I was not able to get it, but a friend got it, so I was able to borrow their copy. This is the Guild of Merchant Explorers. The Guild of Merchant Explorers is the new game from AEG, and Dunstan and Gilbert are the designers of Chocolate Factory and Elysium, as well as a number of other games. A couple designers whose work I really like. There was a lot of buzz about Guild of Merchant Explorers beforehand. Rahdo was absolutely raving about it, and I know that it sold out really fast at Gen Con. And I'm here to say, generally, yeah, I get it. Solid game, really interesting. So here's the lowdown. In Guild of Merchant Explorers, each player gets a matching map of the same region. There are 4 different maps in the game, and the game plays up to 4 people. So you could play up to 4 different maps, and they're certainly reusable. I have only tried the beginner map in the 2 games of this I've played. So the game has a flip a card bingo style reveal where there's a deck of cards, you flip a card, everybody does the thing that was revealed on the card. The way the game works is that you have this map that you're exploring, and everybody starts in the central city and works their way out from that central city doing their exploration. There is a whole bunch of water on the map and 3 different terrain types: desert, forest, and mountain. Each turn, whoever is the first player is going to flip one of the cards from the exploration deck, and it's going to tell you to explore either 2 desert tiles, 2 forest tiles, 1 mountain tile, 2 random tiles, or 3 water tiles, spaces. And you explore those by putting out cubes on those spaces. Easy peasy so far. If you fill up a region, so a region is a connected group of hexes of the same type, if there's 3 forest spaces together and you fill up all 3 forest spaces with your explore action, then you find a village there, and you take one of your cubes off and put one of your village tokens on. The villages are they're little wooden pieces about the size of cubes. There's a couple other things as well. There's treasures that you can find, there are towers that you can discover, and so on. And so here's where the game gets really interesting. I already told you 5 of the 6 Explorer cards in the deck. The 6th one is just a card with the Roman numeral 1 on it, which says, use your round 1 power. So when this card comes out, Everybody takes 2 cards off of the special powers deck and chooses one of those cards that they took and puts it next to the one spot on their player board. These powers are incredible. They're game-breaking, massively powerful powers that are situationally incredible, but not universally so. And so they heavily create a force toward which you need to work. So you take the card that's most advantageous to you, and then after that, you're going to work so that you can make the most of the card you've taken. Because here's the really clever part. In the first round, when that Roman numeral 1 card comes out, you do the action on this card that you just got. Then we're going to pick up all 6 of those explore cards. You're going to take all your cubes off your map. You'll leave your villages on, which is why you needed to find villages for the first part. And then in the second round, you do it all again, only now you're going to add a Roman numeral 2 card and a second special power. So now you have the first special power you got and the second one. They're both going to trigger once in the second round. Third round, you do it again. You're going to have 3 special powers. Then in round 4, you trigger all 3 powers, plus you get to re-trigger one of them. So by the end of the game, your first power has gone off 4 or maybe 5 times, and so on. And because these powers are all extremely robust, this results in an explosion of work on your map, which means that you're going to get a ton done. So this game is really neat. There's a bunch of different ways you can score points, and the explosion of power that comes from these cards results in a really fascinating and delightful amplification of the gameplay experience. In the first round, it feels like there is no way I'm going to be able to do anything. And by round 4, you've covered a huge part of the board. I think you have 32 cubes, and my daughter in round 3 was saying, what happens if we run out of cubes? Remember, you're removing all your cubes from the board each round. So if she's saying, what happens if we run out of cubes? She's literally saying, what happens if I get 32 cubes onto the board this round? She didn't, but it was real close. So that's fascinating. I talked about another game a couple weeks ago called The City from Tom Lehman, which also has an incredible ramping up feel. This game reminds me of that a little bit. That game didn't feel quite so hopeless. This one, when you're first contemplating what the game is, it feels almost hopeless that you're going to get anything done. But these powers are so dramatic that it really goes a long way. Guild of Merchant Explorers is really fun, and I'm looking forward to playing it again a few more times before I return it to my friend who loaned it to me. It may very well end up on our buy list because we sure enjoy it, and I'm sure they're going to come out with more maps, which is the variant that makes the game exciting. There are, however, a couple design choices that I want to comment on that I think could have been done differently or would have been more to my taste had they been done differently. Design choice number 1, the money tokens are all identical on one side and numbered on the other, so you can do a small world style hiding of your points. The designers or the developers said in the Board Game Geek forum that this was because in playtesting they had a number of people who felt really discouraged after like round 2 that they were way behind on points, even though the point swing is wild. I think it's a lot like Dice Miner in that way. But the fiddliness of having to check your tokens to see which one is which and trade in 5 ones for a 5 or 5 ones and a 5 for a 10, that sort of thing is a little on the annoying side, as it is with Small World. I would have liked, especially because the game is relatively inconsequential in terms of components. I mean, there's a lot of cubes, but there's not a board or anything. I think 4 little privacy shields that you could put your coins behind would have solved the problem in the same way and been easier to do. Problem 2 that I had, I thought some of the bonus cards that you get from finding treasures, which I didn't even explain, were hard to read, and there were some typos in which the way that the Explore card looked in the final rendering does not match how it looks in the rule book, which is annoying and led to some questions on our part. And then finally, number 3, the visual design. The maps are lovely. The feel of the game is neat, but I think because they were going for this sort of old-timey map look, they went with these really washed out colors that makes the whole game feel pretty beige, which I just think was not a great choice. I mean, they had the opportunity for really vibrant colors, really interesting looking stuff, and they went for the most sort of muted of the possibilities, which again, I understand from a theme point why they did that, but I think that the game would still have worked with more vibrant colors and would have been more pleasing to look at. all in all, 3 minor complaints about an otherwise really, really interesting game. So far of games I've played this year, this is really high on my list of, you should check this out if you get an opportunity. The Guild of Merchant Explorers really is definitely going to be a hit for AEG. I suspect it's going to get a bunch of awards next year, and I think it's probably deserving. So check that out if you get a chance. That's the Guild of Merchant Explorers from AEG and designers Dunstan and Gilbert. Have you played any of these games? Head over to Board Game Geek Guild 3269 and let me know your thoughts on them, or any other games you've tried recently. You can also send me a geek mail message. Wombat929 is my username on Board Game Geek, or by email, brendan@rattleboxgames.com. I appreciate your joining me on my walk today, and I hope that your next walk is as pleasant as mine was. Bye-bye.
Brought to you by Rattlebox Games.